Indeed, our studio guest this morning is the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. She'll be joining us very shortly, but first we'll see what the Sunday papers are covering around the country. And, Annabel, of course, the return of Kevin Rudd to the Cabinet seems to be the main angle. Yeah, and there were pictures to go with it. I mean, I've got this ambition to one day put together a coffee table book of Kevin Rudd's photo opportunities, because yesterday was an absolute corker. When people get ministries, they generally, maybe they put out a statement expressing their humble gratitude and so on. And Kevin Rudd went for a walk around Lake Burley Griffin with the American ambassador. I was sort of thinking at some point there might be a flyover or some sort of 21-gun salute. There was sort of some odd kind of sounds from around about Canberra, which I think was generally DFAT officials whacking their heads on their desks.
Yeah, but they created Kevin. I mean, you know, he is a creature of foreign affairs, so
yeah, now they've got him for good.
He's gone home.
But it's kind of interesting because this is, in some ways, the least surprising element of this reshuffle. I mean, I think we got to the point where everyone realised that, you know, having committed to Kevin Rudd months ago, Julia Gillard had to have him in the Cabinet, and it became increasingly implausible to think that you would put him anywhere else. But it's still such a fascinating appointment despite its predictability.
And I think one of the problems with the Rudd government, and as we know, I think Stephen Smith did very well as Foreign Minister, but Kevin Rudd drove foreign policy. Our relationships with our neighbours weren't particularly good. My own dealings with the Japanese and the Indians indicated that the governments in Tokyo and New Delhi weren't happy with Australia under Kevin Rudd. The view is that other people tell me that the relationship with China was strained. This wasn't a very successful period for Australian foreign policy.
And Gerard, on top of that, I mean, to see Kevin Rudd yesterday parading himself with the ambassador from the United States, I mean, how would China, Indonesia, Japan, India take that? Same way as they took some of the activities over the course of his prime ministership, I think.
Well, I don't think the problem being with the US ambassador of itself is a problem. They're our major ally. I don't think that's the problem. But the relationship with Japan and India certainly was a problem, and that wasn't mended during any period of Kevin Rudd's government.
But it was labouring a point. I mean, the last person who did this was Mark Latham, who had a press conference where he had the American flag behind him in the caucus.
But Kevin Rudd was after media coverage. He might have been the only ambassador available on the day.
Oh, no. He would have got media coverage.
Press opportunities. He'd be down to the ambassador from the Federated States of Micronesia for smaller announcements. They'll just be hanging around in the background. I'm actually looking forward to the Bono one. Well, Julie Bishop had another observation to make about the appointment. Here she is.
The leader who was sacked by his own party because he couldn't get along with people is now Australia's #1 diplomat.
And Dennis, Stephen Smith, of course, made all of this possible because, he kind of simultaneously, with Julia Gillard, saw there was a problem that needed to be fixed?
I think the line of the day is he took one for the team. And as he took one for the team, he made sure that he left a message for both Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, which is the old Gareth Evans line when Gareth was Foreign Minister under Paul Keating, that there should not be a crack of light on foreign policy between the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. Now, this is a line that Stephen Smith used to use all the time when people would criticise the fact that he and Kevin Rudd were so much in sync as Foreign Minister and Prime Minister. Now he's walked out of the Foreign Ministry, he's left that on the table, and he's saying to both Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd, you've got to make this relationship work. Yeah. It's important for the government, it's important for the country, and there better not be a crack of light. And I think it applies to both of them.
There's an argument to say that Stephen Smith was taking one for the team the whole time he was Foreign Minister, and I think that, the extent to which he was a functional, emotionally intelligent Foreign Minister and managed to operate under those sort of conditions, I think speaks volumes for his ability. I suspect that he did a better job of that portfolio than anyone else in the caucus could.
I think this is a good appointment because defence is a huge issue and probably more important than foreign affairs in the next 3 years, and I think Stephen Smith on his record can probably handle it, I would think. And Gerard, the other angle, of course, is how some of the plotters, as it's put in the newspapers this morning, have been rewarded. Well, this is a story, and I notice in the Sunday Age Josh Gordon refers to a coup. Well, there wasn't a coup. And as to the plotters, well, I think if you look back on it now, Mark Arbib, Bill Shorten and Paul Howes and others did Labor a great favour. If they hadn't have acted when they did act, I think the person you're interviewing today would have been Tony Abbott rather than Julia Gillard. So let's get that one out the way. On the second point, Bill Shorten's a man of obvious abilities. He should be in the ministry. Mark Arbib is still to be tested, but since no one got excluded, there's no reason why he should have got excluded. And some of the parliamentary secretaries coming in, like David Feeney and Don Farrell, are very capable people, and Craig Emerson, who wasn't regarded as one of the plotters, who I think went with Kevin Rudd, but he has been promoted. But Craig Emerson, deserves a position in the cabinet, in spite of whatever relationships he has with anyone else. I think, look, if you're not going to sack anyone, this is probably pretty good.
Exactly. What's the alternative? To punish those who actually facilitated something that the vast majority of the caucus supported.
And it's not as though they were sort of rushed into cabinet. They are both in the ministry, and they've got significant roles, but they weren't given, sort of the top prize of going into cabinet. I think they're sensible appointments. I think Gerard's quite right. Bill Shorten is a person of enormous ability, and now he's got his chance to demonstrate that ability a bit more. Mark Arbib, I think the jury is out a bit on. He was an effective minister, but he had a few shocking times in that ministry, most notably when at the last national conference of the Labor Party, when he went on Sky TV and didn't know what he was talking about. But now he's got a chance to step up and prove himself.
This is, I think, the Abbott appointment is really interesting. I think it's more a challenge to him, an opportunity for him to make some policy headway. I mean, this is an incredibly difficult portfolio, one that involves patience, application, hard work, and very little by way of public approbation or, it's all hard yakka. And I think that this is a really interesting and clever appointment on the basis that it encourages something different from this guy.
I can understand why Tony Abbott says this was a plot. That's what oppositions do. And I can understand why Tony Abbott says it was a coup. But for journalists to say this was a coup is just ludicrous. I mean, it wasn't a coup. Coups happen in other places. They don't happen in Western democracies. And
Annabel, Peter Garrett and schools, I'd imagine the schools will be lining up inviting the new minister in.
Yeah, best parent show up ever on, on school minister visit day. Look, for my money, this is the most interesting appointment of this whole reshuffle because it tells us a lot about what Julia Gillard thinks of Peter Garrett's treatment in the past. Now, she has given him not just a decent portfolio, but she has given him the portfolio area which she has consistently nominated as her principal area of reform. I mean, she's kind of, to use a kind of Star Wars analogy, she is, he is Luke Skywalker to her Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, and that is an enormous expression of faith, right? And also an opportunity for Peter Garrett to, succeed or fail in this kind of pretty crucial enterprise, because that schools reform gig, it's not an accident that Julia Gillard nominates that as the hardest thing she's ever done.
And it was the only successful reform of the 3 years of the Rudd-Gillard government. I mean, in other areas reform was wound back, but in education, Julia Gillard did particularly well.
Now, Rob Oakeshott, of course, passed on the regional portfolio. An interesting take, though, from Bob Brown on that during the week. Here's Bob Brown.
I think if we had moved for a ministry 2 weeks ago, the outcome may well have been different to the establishment of this government. I would have been a headline on the front page of the Australian the next day as how could you... So, you see, we were quite aware of the campaign going on there.
It's very true, isn't it?
That's interesting.
That it might have changed the whole dynamic.
I'm a turn-off, Brown.
Yeah. And here's an idea how best ideas arrived too late. Julia Gillard was at the football. Another close result in politics and sport last night. It was suggested she could have used Barry Hall. Here she is.
Well, I've had a few causes to bite my nails this week, but I was doing it at this match as well. It was pretty stressful, but a great result.
And you didn't think perhaps, Barry's big and tough and strong, ever get him to pay a little quiet visit to the independents over those 2 weeks to maybe persuade them?
No, I didn't. Maybe I should have thought of that in the middle of the 17 days of negotiations, but it passed me by.
He could be very convincing.
I'm sure he could be very convincing.